Good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar, DE&I Strategy, How It Will Attract and Retain Your Employees. My name is Stephanie Hurst and I'm the Member Programs Manager here at the National Apartment Association. Thanks for joining us today. Before we get started, I want to go over a few housekeeping points. This presentation is being recorded and will be available on NAA's website next week. During the presentation, you can type your questions into the chat box on your screen and we will share them with our presenter. We have left time at the end for questions. And now I will turn the microphone over to Shakora Connor, a member of NAA's Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. Shakora.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. We so appreciate you being here today, joining us for this very important topic. And I am extremely excited to present to you your presenter today, not only because she's from my hometown, okay, but because she is growing in her craft, and I am privy to be here to witness her very first NAA presentation. Your speaker today is Elizabeth Newkirk. We know her as Liz. Liz currently serves as a manager of digital media at Lovesac and Brownlee. She is originally from Atlanta, Georgia, but currently resides in the Queen City, Charlotte, North Carolina, with her furry companion, Lola. Liz has a background in digital marketing and analytics, content creation, and she has the honor of overseeing the execution and design of diversity, equity, and inclusion strategies with her employer. Liz has a DE&I certification from the University of South Florida, and she's currently pursuing a Fostering Inclusion and Diversity certification from Yale School of Management. She serves on her local, state, and national DE&I committees within the Apartment Association. So while she is like out there being great and champion for diversity and inclusion, she also loves spending time when she has it, because she's super busy, okay, dancing, drinking Starbucks, and hanging out in Target, because who doesn't want to hang out at Target? So now, without further ado, I would like to turn this session over to your speaker for today, Ms. Liz Newkirk.
Thank you so much, Shakora. It is such a pleasure to be here today. I am so excited to talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion with you all and how it can help you attract and retain talent. So we're going to get right into it. I hope that you all have your volumes all the way up. Because this has been a hot topic that I have heard that everybody is trying to get more information on. And for those that are possibly driving or visually impaired, I am a Black African-American woman. I have red fire hair, and I have on a black t-shirt with glasses. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and let's go ahead and deep dive into it. So how much does turnover cost? It costs us a lot of money. As you can see on your screen, it costs us about $160 billion. This is the estimation that has come from Forbes. We in the multifamily industry actually have a higher percentage rate than any other industry in the country. We currently sit at 33%. The national average is about 24%. So let's go on to the next slide, please, and look at some industry results. So in a recent survey that I came across, I want to give a special shout out to Swift Bunny. They showed us that 56.8% of employees who are tenured, so that means that they've been at your organization between 5 to 10 years. That is the rate that they are currently leaving in compared to 2020. The number of employees that are between the ages of 30 to 50 years old, they are currently leaving at a rate of 54.6%. Those are people that have been within your organization for 10 to 15 years. So we know that we definitely have a problem, but what we're seeing is that we are seeing that women are leaving at a higher rate as well. So let's look into that. Next slide, please. So women specifically, or those who identify as women, are leaving at a higher rate than men. Some of the reasons why they're leaving is balancing life and work. We know that women are saying that they have to manage their children, their schedules. For me, it's my furry baby. I do not have kids, but my furry baby needs to be balanced as well. Some of us have started working from home. Those have also led to workplace exhaustion. You're trying to figure out how to balance work and home. Another issue is that they're seeing a lack of health benefits. So this includes maternity leave. This includes reproduction benefits, or anything that has to do with you and some of your reproductive rights. There has been a lack of growth. These are some of the things that women are complaining about in the workplace. In a recent survey by Culture Amp, they say that 94% value mental health benefits over everything else. So women want to be able to not only be themselves, but they want to prioritize their mental and emotional health as well. This has led to a really big perception gap. So 78% of leaders feel as though that they are creating empowering environments. However, only 32% feel as though that is true. So obviously there is a misconception between employees and employers, especially between certain groups, particularly women, like I mentioned here. But when we look at different industry professionals, we see that maintenance professionals or maintenance techs have an even higher rate. So hiring and retention are especially hard with maintenance professionals. If you work on site, or if you work, at the corporate area, or you're trying to attract people, to your community, you do not need me to tell you that hiring and finding maintenance techs is an ever-growing issue. One of the reasons why, and what it is that they're saying why they don't want to come to work, or why they don't even stay, or now recently we see people get hired but they end up ghosting, is because they have mental health challenges. The other issue is that they feel as though that they are not being paid according to the work it is that they're putting in. So again, it goes back to that perception gap. They also don't feel as though that they have the ability to be able to move forward. They feel as though that once they're a maintenance tech or a maintenance supervisor, that's pretty much it. So they're looking to try to get some of that cross training to figure out how they can also help on-site professionals like leasing agents or leasing professionals, assistant managers. They're trying to figure out how can they better improve those situations it is that they deal with on a day-to-day basis, like trying to get an apartment ready. However, they feel as though that they don't know how they can get to that next step. And also there's a lack of representation. A lot of the times they feel as though that they only see themselves at the lower level. They're saying that when they look at maintenance supervisors or people who work at the corporate office, they only look one specific way. They don't see themselves at that higher level, and it can be really frustrating. And so when we look at women and when we look at maintenance techs or maintenance professionals, these are some of the two that have the highest levels of a lack of retention, but also they're not really excited about joining our industry or even staying where they work. So one of the solutions that I've learned that can really help with maintenance professionals or maintenance techs specifically is offer scholarships and reimbursement. This is something that women have said as well. They want their employers to invest in their education. We know that education is very important in our industry. So we need to find ways to make sure that everyone has access to that education. And also, again, offer mental health days and partner with organizations like Headspace to tackle those hard days that they deal with on a day-to-day basis. Now we're going to get into some of the definitions. Let's look at what is diversity. Next slide, please. So I really want us to kind of deep dive a little bit into the actual definition and the science. I was a former biology major when I went to school, so I have more of a science or analytical type brain. So I want us to kind of look at that and see how that can help us propel equity. Next slide, please. So I love the cute baby on the slide. This is not my baby, but what is diversity? So there are 4 different types of diversity. The 4 different types is internal, external, organizational, and worldview. We're going to focus on two in this particular webinar. So internal diversity is what you were born into. These demographics are something that a person is born with, and this is their inner perception of themselves. So internal diversity helps people see a reflection of themselves within your organization. This can help create a sense of belonging. Let's look at the next definition. The next definition is organizational diversity, or something that DE&I leaders may know as functional diversity. So organizational diversity focuses on what role is assigned to them by their organization, right? So I am a Black or African-American woman who is at the mid-level of my organization. So that is two ways that organizational diversity and internal diversity relate to each other. However, if you don't really understand your organizational culture and where you lack in different parts of your organization, you can't really say, well, we're diverse. You have to break down every single section of your organization to see where there is a lack of diversity to make sure that everybody has a voice. So let's look at organizational culture. Next slide, please. So this is something I actually haven't heard a lot of. I received a certification from Arizona State regarding organizational culture. And one of the reasons why I think that this is so important is because as a marketer, I have to understand my company culture and my brand in order for me to be able to create a marketing strategy. The same thing applies when you're talking about diversity, equity, and inclusion. So organizational or company culture consists of shared beliefs and values established by leaders and then communicated and reinforced through various methods, ultimately shaping employees' perceptions, behaviors, and understanding. Organizational culture sets the context for everything an enterprise does. Because industries and situations vary significantly, there is not a one size fits all. So please do not get your organizational culture, together and then say, well, you can, take our strategy that we're doing. That is not how it works. You have to understand what is important to you and how you view your organization, because culture is going to vary at all different levels and with all different organizations, right? So you're going to fit in one of these three, if not all of these three buckets. The first one is social. The second one is materialistic. The third one is ideological. So there are some organizations that look at things like class or distribution of power. That matters a lot to that organization. That kind of falls in that social bucket. Materialistic is achievements and support. This is something that we value within our organization more than anything else. It doesn't matter what level that you are. It doesn't matter who you are. If you're getting achievements, or we want to recognize your achievements, we also want to support you in your endeavors. That definitely matters to us as an organization. That's materialistic culture. Ideological is values, ideas, and beliefs. So if you value things like bringing awareness to education, or bringing awareness to going green, or domestic violence, that is ideological. That's an ideological culture. You may find through different surveys, which I'm going to show you in the next slide, how you can find out which bucket you fit in. And again, you may have all three, but not all three will have the same weight. So in the next slide, please, let's look at a few ways that we can find our organizational or company culture. The first step is you want to look at your vision, your mission, and your value statements. Once you realize that, and if you don't, please ask, whoever is in charge to give that to you. Once you realize and understand what your vision and your mission and value statements are, that can help you with the starting point of creating an organizational culture strategy. The next one is exit and entrance interviews. We want to see why people are leaving and why people are joining our organization. The reason why this is important is because what I've learned is everybody has a different perception of what their organizational culture is, but the people that will give you a true understanding of that is everyone's different voice, and the reason why those fresh set of eyes that are coming into your organization and why people are leaving. You want to understand why people left. You want to understand, I guess, in a sense, why people broke up with you. The next one is a digital media audit. I cannot harness on this enough. You want to see what people are saying about your organization in the digital scope. They say that your brand is what people are saying about you when you're not in the room. So you want to see what people are saying on your Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, your Google reviews, your customer service teams can definitely provide a lot of insight into how people feel about you, your product, your service, and your organization, which helps make up your organizational culture. You can also do an anonymous survey. You want to ask your current employees what they think and how they feel. Another one that you want to do is you want to look at your onboarding and your pathway to success procedures. This will help you with that materialistic part if you're really supporting your employees as much as possible to kind of help with that perception gap. You may feel as though that you're giving them all the tools that they need to be successful. However, the only person that will really tell you that are the employees that have to go through the process. Identifying company and organizational culture is vital to identifying diversity and inclusion gaps within your organization. So let's talk about inclusion a little bit. So what is inclusion? One of the things that I hear a lot is that inclusion is a seat at the table. It is my opinion, and I am still, a work in progress. None of this is a silver bullet, but I am of the opinion that inclusion is more than a seat at the table. It is making sure that everyone feels valued and that they also add value. So the culture, which is the mix of people that can come into work and feel comfortable and confident to be themselves and work in a way that suits them and delivers value to your business needs. I cannot express enough that creating an inclusive environment helps you retain your talented employees. Diversity helps attract them, right? But inclusion helps retain them. It keeps them in your workplace. And the only way that that's going to happen is if they feel as though that they have a sense of belonging. And when they don't, you actually come across something called the facades of conformity and self-defeating behavior, which is something that we know also as exclusion. So let's take a look at the consequences of not having an inclusive environment. Next slide, please. So there is an emotional cost to kind of doing what we saw in 2020. When everyone was putting these black boxes, right? And everybody was saying, we stand with you in solidarity. We hear you, we feel you, we understand. If you post that on social media, but you don't actually look at the actions, again, your organizational culture, and you don't really look at the scope of who you are as an organization, that can come across as performative. It is very, very harmful. I cannot express that enough. And the reason why it's harmful is because your employees have a tendency to feel as though that they do not belong within your organization because of what it is that they see, but also you didn't take the time to create an inclusive environment to help them feel valued. So you posted saying that you stood in solidarity with people, but the reality of your organization says something completely different. And when they don't feel appreciated and when people don't feel valued, they have a tendency to participate in this social exclusion. And I'm going to kind of go to my notes here. So social exclusion was first coined by Ren Lenoir in France in 1970. And he said that social exclusion is when everyone doesn't feel as though they have equal access to opportunities. So some of those examples is the ability to be able to give input. Again, we talk about education. I mentioned that earlier. So access to education and educational opportunities. The facades of conformity is a false representation of oneself. It's kind of like wearing a mask, right? You're not really being who you truly are. You're performing to align yourself with your organization, even though they're participating in things that don't necessarily align with you, whether it's morally or ethically. This can lead to emotional exhaustion, which can mediate employee behavior and job satisfaction. So if you look at the science behind why people feel as though that they don't want to stay at your workplace, or when they see something and experience something completely different, even as something as simple as the interview process, it can automatically lead to this. And this is kind of what is contributing to what we see now in ghosting, where people are getting the offer, they did the interview, they went through the whole process, then they dive a little bit deeper like Generation Z is doing, and then they're like, you know what? this actually isn't who I am, or they get there for a week, they realize that they have to conform, and they have to conform way too much than what they're accustomed to, which no one should have to do at all, and then they end up leaving. And not only that, when we look at these two scientific facts, we also realize that this leads to rejection as well. It can feel as though that you're not actually belonging in the area that you're in, or you're trying to have like these conversations with people that you don't normally have these conversations with. And it's just like emotionally draining and exhausting. And what we find is that neurologically, people experience rejection the same way that they experience physical pain. It's kind of like burning your hand with, some hot coffee. Your brain recognizes it the same way. And again, this can all lead to burnout, lack of interest in your job, or even something that we know as code switching. The way that we can combat this is by expressing compassion, not just with others, but also with ourselves. And there's a beautiful quote that we're going to look at in the next slide. So we want to look at, so I'm going to go backwards. So we're going to look at how can inclusion help you retain your talent, right? So empathy, compassion, and removing bias. Practicing empathy and compassion, I cannot express that enough. Empathy and sympathy are two different things, but we want to make sure that we actively listen to our employees and believe their experiences. Someone can tell you, I don't feel comfortable wearing my natural hair in the workplace. We want to believe that. Just because that's not something that we personally have experienced doesn't mean for it to be true. But we've all experienced rejection at some point, whether it's high school, if you've ever been on the dating scene, or even you applied for something and you didn't get it. We've all experienced that. And that allows for us to be compassionate and share our experiences with one another to help us get through that experience, but also believe it, because rejection happens to any and everyone. Cultural training. No one and no group is a monolith. That means that no one is the same. So we want to look at every single demographic or group that's within our organization and get a cultural understanding of who they are. The next one is we want to do employee surveys. I mentioned this before. The enter and the exit interviews can definitely give you insight into people and who they are and their perception of you, your brand, and your organization. You also want to train your employee resource groups, and I cannot stress this enough, compensate your employee resource groups and your people that are doing the work. DE&I is a lot. It can be most emotionally and mentally exhausting, but also rewarding all in the same breath. But it also takes a lot of work. This is relatively new to our industry. So there's a lot of research and deep diving that has to be done, and also a level of vulnerability that is required for these roundtable discussions. We want to make sure that we are compensating properly our employee resource groups and people that devote their time to the cause. Last but not least is social workers on site. We talked about earlier mental health on site and with on-site teams, and that being something that they value. Having social workers to help them during that time, whether it's something that they experience at an apartment community or whether it's something that they're experiencing within your own organization, having someone who has experience in this avenue or in this realm can really help you retain your employees because they feel seen and heard. And they also have the opportunity to express themselves without feeling as though that they could be penalized for doing so. Doing all of this in a 2019 study, shows that 56%, there's a 56% increase in job performance, a 50% reduction in turnover risk, and a 75% decrease in employee sick days. We know that burnout and employee exhaustion and the facades of conformity and self-defeating behavior can actually lead and increase your stress levels, which can cause for you to get sick. If your employees are sick, they're not coming to work. So implementing an inclusive strategy in your workplace does nothing but reward you and your employees in the end. Now we're going to look at that compassion quote. So what is compassion? Compassion is not a relationship between the healer and the wounded. It is a relationship between equals. Only when we know our own darkness well can we be present in the darkness of others. Compassion becomes real when we recognize our shared community. This is a beautiful quote that I came across from Brene Brown. And this is what we need to think of or have at the forefront whenever we think about inclusion, whenever we think about listening to others, whenever we think about organizational culture and understanding our brand. We all want to have this with a sense of empathy and compassion. It's only when we recognize the weakness in ourselves that we can understand the struggles with others and understand that we're all in this together. And this is why I believe that we need to add to the B to belonging and equity. Next slide, please. So we can't talk about equity without belonging, right? So let's look at what does equity actually look like. Next slide, please. So I just want to make sure that everybody knows and understands that equality and equity are different. They're not the same. Equity is making sure, again, thinking about inclusiveness, making sure that everybody has the tools and the resources that they need in order to succeed. Equity is being fair. However, fairness, a lot of the times when we pursue fairness, it comes with the struggle of our own bias or biases, right? So our bias can harness barriers to equity, and it requires a really good inclusion strategy. So this is something that I feel as though that we can combat when we look at the 3 C's: communication, compensation, and compassion. There's that word again, and empathy. With communication, we have to understand the specific needs related to demographics. We have to listen and we have to empathize. Some ways that we can do this is look at where you lack diversity in your organization. Again, you have to look at your organization and the way that they're built and see where diversity is lacking. You also have to do bias and empathy training. It's only then that you'll be able to practice compassion. So that way, when people tell you what it is that's happening or what it is that they're experiencing, that you can actually do something about it. And we want to make sure that we have communication for the impaired. There are people who are not, able to fully hear what it is that you're saying. They have their own disabilities, whether it's visible or non-visible. And if we are able to create a way for people to do that through our fair housing practices, we can definitely do that and apply that same energy in the workplace. Compensation. All employees need different levels of income and benefits because of their backgrounds. This is something that I recently learned when I took a sociology course at Arizona State, and I realized that people who are transgender, when they are looking for health benefits within the workplace, one of the things that they're looking for are those health benefits, and if it's going to be specific to them and their needs. So the LGBTQIA community, that's one of the first things that they're looking at. And there are different resources that are available to you that will allow for you to be able to see and kind of audit if your organization has inclusive practices for that community. But just think about that. That's just one group. What about women? What about men? What about veterans? What about people who are abled or disabled? You also want to look at some remote solutions. I know that this is something that we struggle with, but remote solutions is definitely something that is beneficial for everyone. If people aren't able to work from home in some way, shape, or form, or at least have a hybrid solution, then it would probably be in the best interest for us to kind of figure it out as much as we possibly can. That was one of the not number one, but around the top 5 things that some of the women were looking for. Compassion and empathy. This requires vulnerability, humility, and critical thinking skills. We have to understand background identities, we have to be open, and we have to be curious. And I put little B's on there just to kind of go to the next slide. And I love bees, so. The reason why I say that we have to be open, be curious, is that we are a hive, we are all working and creating together. However, just because all bees look alike doesn't mean that they all do the same job and they all have the same needs, which means that, again, I said this before, we are not a monolith, which means that we cannot be treated the same. All of us have different needs. All of us have different things that help us feel included in the workplace. And it's when we take a deep dive into inclusion and we look at diversity, then and only then can empathy happen. But we need to make sure that we are empathetic and compassionate in providing those needs to our employees and really looking at ourselves and doing some self-reflection first, which can help us move the needle forward in DE&I. Next slide, please. I want to thank you all today for tuning in. I hope that you found the information today helpful. I will turn it now over to Mr. Cora Connor and anyone that has any questions.
I got to tell you, that was great. Liz, you did a great job. Seriously, that was very informative. I know I learned a lot, and I'm assuming that everybody else on here learned too. So we'll open the floor if anyone has any questions. But since I've got the mic, I'm going to go first, okay?
Yes,
so,
ma'am.
the question is, what are some of the trends that you see out here, for 2020, 2023 in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion? What are you seeing?
Oh, most definitely. So this one definitely had to be first because it's something that we're experiencing on site every single day, and that's the hiring and retention. The next thing that I'm seeing is the request for remote work. I mentioned that a little bit earlier. I have the privilege to be able to work from home, but I know that not everybody has that, availability, but it's a demand that we're definitely seeing, and we're seeing that Generation Z specifically are not giving up on this. So we need to, like I said earlier, kind of figure it out. The other thing is supporting gender identity. We saw this in fair housing back in 2021, and this is something, again, that a lot of people are looking for in the workplace. They're looking for employers to be able to accept how people identify, understanding them and their pronouns. And it's a relatively simple thing to do. Honestly, it's just asking people, what are your pronouns? How do you identify? Putting it on your name badge, or kind of like in the thing that I have over here where my pronouns are. That's definitely something that Generation Z and people in the workplace are looking for. And multicultural inclusive marketing. I actually just got off of a webinar with Ad Age. I apologize. And they were talking about this, and this is one of the ways that employers can show their diversity on their digital marketing or social media platforms. And that's really understanding, like your organizational culture and your values and your mission, and understanding how you can showcase that on your social media platforms. In that webinar, they said that Generation Z does a deep dive into an organization or a brand's social media platforms before they even decide if that's a place that they're going to work, even if that's a place that they're going to live. We're seeing a lot of Gen Zers going on TikTok, doing live views of them, touring an apartment community or whatnot. And this is definitely something that is really important and high level. And I think we kind of have to look at how marketing and DE&I can kind of come together, which can help us create a strategy within our organizations.
Yeah. Funny that you mentioned the TikTokers. I just watched one this morning. I love those things. I mean,
I do too.
They are awesome. They are awesome. And just to let everybody know, this will be available. This is being recorded. You can check this out on the NAA website. There is a section there for webinars for DE&I. And I see some people chatting it up, having some questions about that. And you know what? I think that we should ask, what is the most difficult part about putting together a DE&I program, Liz?
Oh man, first is the mental capacity. It requires, some definitely some mental strength. But I will say one of the things that I have seen is, resources. A lot of people struggle trying to figure out where to get the resources to implement a DE&I strategy. And in addition to that, the buy-in. I'm of the opinion, Shakora, that no one should have to say, hey, I need to feel seen and included in your workplace. That's kind of like what it sounds like when people say to me, oh, I need for you to give me the business case of DE&I. I don't understand that. But if that is the case, those surveys that I mentioned can definitely help with that. Doing entrance and exit interviews is very simple. Rewarding your employees that participate in those employee surveys can definitely be beneficial to you and your brand. And once you get those metrics, another source that you can use is Swift Money. Once you get those metrics, that can help you build that business case into understanding your organization and implementing that DE&I strategy. So for anybody that's looking to get started, that's definitely something I say you start with those entrance and exit interviews. start with those anonymous surveys with your current employees, look at those metrics, see where you lack in diversity throughout your organization, and ask them how they feel on a day-to-day basis, which can help tackle, that inclusion. But I would definitely say that's one of the biggest issues that I see when people have an issue of getting started.
Okay. And Liz, with Losac and Brownlee, you are putting together, you oversee their DE&I, is that right? Okay.
Yes.
So let me ask you this, because it's a lot. I understand it can really, look like, oh my gosh, right? Trying to put this together. But what about starting with like the committees and the task force, things of that nature? How do you do that?
So the first thing I do is I ask us, well, what are we looking to achieve here? Are we looking to be more diverse? And if we are looking to be more diverse, where do we lack in that diversity? The thing that really helped me at L&B was understanding our mission and our values. My boss and the people that are in the C-suite or people that are over me make it absolutely clear that education comes number one. The other thing is that we are willing to support our employees in all of their endeavors. And it doesn't matter what you look like, it doesn't matter how you identify, are you able to get the job done? And if not, what do you need from me in order for you to do that? So when we look at those three different things and what makes up our organization, it allows for me to be able to say, okay, well, maybe we don't have enough, attorneys that are of color. Why? Is that an issue that we're having, internally attracting people to our organization? Or is that something that we're seeing at a national level, like through the American Bar Association? What can we do to tackle that? So we ended up learning that not a lot of people of color apply to go to law school. And one of those reasonings is the LSATs. Well, now we know that they're looking at removing the LSATs because that's a barrier to success, right? It's not an L&B culture issue. It's a legal, like law school issue. And so now that we know this, it's like, how can we provide tuition, scholarships, internships to help people attract to our organization? And that's exactly what we're doing. We're doing internships. We're partnering with the city of Charlotte to create those internships and attract people who normally wouldn't have access to, schools, resources, or what have you, to be able to become a lawyer or even know what being a landlord tenant law lawyer looks like. Try saying that 5 times fast. Even what that looks like. So we kind of give them a day in the life and an opportunity to shadow. And that's been very beneficial for us, but also for people and lawyers of the future.
That's something. I tell you, that's great information. And it makes me think about social media again, right? With the TikToks and things of that nature. You spoke about the TikTok and marketing. Is there a way to market your brand to talk about this and show people this to bring them on to your organization?
Most definitely. Many moons ago, I was actually a leasing agent, and at the time it was called agent. I think now it's professional, so excuse me, y'all. But I had the opportunity to work on site, and one of my roles and responsibilities was creating content for our social media platforms to attract people to our community, not necessarily employees, but we were looking to have tenants and residents. So one of the first things that I did was I looked at the area. I looked at, again, our value and who we are and our mission and what it is that we're looking to accomplish. And at one of the properties specifically, we were in a high veteran or high military area. And so we know that people want to feel valued. So one of the things that I did was I did for it was like a veteran appreciation week. So we did things like we had different roundtable talks. We had people who had different housing resources, getting your benefits resources. We had that for one day. And then I want to say towards the end of the week, we had like a jazz symphony orchestra, people come in. We had a really nice dinner where everybody could eat, and we gave them little care packages just to show them that we appreciate them. And when we did that on site and I posted on social media, we saw a huge increase of people from that community, veterans and their families. And it helped us increase our overall occupancy. But all I was really doing was just pulling the information and the values of who we are and what we were surrounded with and just placing it on our social media platforms. I know sometimes that it can sound relatively easy, but it can be difficult because you don't really know which groups it is that you want to tackle. But again, once you look at what you're missing, then that will help you be able to reflect your values and your mission on your social media platforms. Just see what it is that your organization values, how you can couple your outreach programs with that, and you can showcase it on your social media platforms. That's one of the easiest ways to do it.
That is great information, Liz. And you know what? I think anybody can take notes on that because number one, it's free, right? Number
$3.99.
two, it's branding. Yeah, it's branding. And number three, so it sounds like being, DE&I friendly and really being intentional about it.
Yes.
You're really going to be successful financially too. I mean, bumping up that occupancy, that was major.
It was a major thing for us. And the great thing about it is that you can look at what it is that you did and it's sustainable enough for you to be able to rinse, repeat, right? You can do it over and over again. So if you know that your organization, like mine, values like domestic violence, we have a huge, campaign that we do every October that talks about domestic violence and how we can tackle that in our industry. And it shows people the human side of like who we are and that we're individuals. I know that the public has a negative perception of our industry, but if people really get to see the human side of us and who we truly are, highlighting your employees, highlighting their stories, highlighting people in the C-suite, showing what it is that you value and placing that on your social media platforms, that right there allows for people who are interested in working in our industry be able to see where your values lie. And that way they don't have to conform or pretend that they allow with the value. They see it, it's upfront, it's right in their face. And they say, you know what, I value education just as much as this organization does. This is a place that I can work. They show me that they value their employees by showing their benefits, being transparent about their pay. That means that I can come to this organization because I know that I'm going to be well taken care of. Even though I might be the only or the first, having those values align with my values allows room for me not to have to, I guess you could say, participate in that facades of conformity or self-defeating behavior, which we all know can be mentally exhausting. We all deserve, the opportunity to be our full, authentic selves.
Very good. Well, I tell you, it just says to me, say a thing, do a thing.
If you're going to say it, do it. Like you said, you made a great point about being intentional. You have to be very intentional about your DE&I strategy.
Very good. All right. So we are coming to a close. I think we can have one more question. Do we have one more question? Okay. Like Liz said, Liz, this was wonderful. I saw your slide, be a rainbow in somebody's cloud. You were most definitely a rainbow for us today. I thank you so much. We appreciate you for being here. And we are going to close. Thank you. Thank you. Okay, so now as we close, I just want to point out two things here. Okay, right now we've got 2 diversity, equity, and inclusion opportunities. The Alex Jacule Diversity, Equity, and Equality, Equity Inclusion Scholarship, as well as Innovation and Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Grant. Okay, so these are 2 things to look forward to. Please share, call for applications. Right now is May through July 29th. You see the link here on the bottom. Go on the website. It's on the NAA website. Please encourage people to apply. Okay, because we know people are doing great things and we'd love to recognize them. Upcoming webinar, leadership change or get out of the way, right? I love it. Leading people in the era of distress, uneasiness, and unusual challenges can be disheartening, demoralizing, and not what you signed up for. Learn about the challenges leaders face today and solid techniques to produce results. Hear about how to be a role model, be a vision through collaboration, and create future leaders and those that you lead. Now that is coming up fast. That is Wednesday, May 25th from 2 to 3 Eastern Standard Time, and it is free. Okay, so why not register? Register right now, share it in your group, send it out to your team. I mean, literally, they can listen to it, okay, while they're working. This is some good stuff, leadership, okay? So we thank you guys. Also, just remember, we've got the additional DNI resources. And let me tell you, the DNI committees have been working on this thing. Oh my gosh, so much information has gone into this. There is so much. Everything that Liz talked about today, number one, you're going to be able to see this video. Number two, look at the resources. Look at Visto, okay? They've got classes on there that you can go through. So we're here for you. NAA is putting this right here in your face, making it available to you. And you can go on the NAA website to get all this information. We thank you guys for joining us. Enjoy the rest of your day.